All right, good evening and welcome everybody. Welcome to Illustrations with composer in residence Michael Feinberg. We're at Bethany Arts Community this evening. This is the latest in our residency program, which brings artists from across the world working in multiple disciplines to come and work and stay here. They stay for about 2 weeks and work on both new works as well as works in process. And the goal of the residency is to give the artists an opportunity to really interact with each other, to share ideas, and really spark innovation. I have to say that this is, I think, the 12th in the series that we've done this year. And we've had people who are coming together for retreats, companies of individuals who've known each other for years, months, days, as well as groups like the group we have here this past 2 weeks who have, I don't think anyone had met each other before they came to Bethany. And the amazing thing about seeing this program and seeing these artists together is how quickly folks become friends. And the number of ideas that have come out of this project, new collaborations that we will be seeing, we hope someday in the future, is really inspiring. So it's been an amazing pleasure to get to know all of you. Great fun. And I really look forward to see where your work goes from here. With that, I also want to say that these events are made possible with the generous support of the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, Arts Westchester, and the generous support of folks like all of you. So I'm now about to introduce Michael. He's a bassist and composer. He's been described as a musical prodigy turned evil genius. We haven't seen too much of the evil side this week. And his focus is eclectic with elements of pop music, classical, and jazz. Over the past decade, he's established himself as an in-demand bassist, composer, band leader, and producer. He's released 8 albums to acclaim from the New York Times, LA Times, Wall Street Journal, Downbeat Magazine, NPR, and the Irish Times. With that, Michael, I turn it over to you.
Hello. Thank you all very much. That is a piece that I've been working on while I've been here in residence, one of the pieces that I've been working on. And it's sort of my thesis for my discussion this evening. So give me 1 second, I'm gonna get some technical things set up and we'll get into it. So a little bit of background about this piece that I just attempted to play. It's a piece called Elegy. Elegy is a poem for loss. It's a piece that I was introduced to when I was in college by one of my bass teachers, Kevin Malden. And I was a jazz student, and I never had the time to dedicate to playing this piece of music. So flash forward to 2020, and I have nothing but time. So I said, oh, we got about 3 or 4 weeks of this lockdown. Let me pull this thing out. So here I am about, a year and a half later, but it's opened up a universe to me about the bass, about myself, about composition, about music, about being a student. I have a teacher for the first time since I was in college, again, because I'm, approaching things that I've never done before. So it's been a nice journey getting to learn this piece, and I have some other stuff I'm going to play for you guys in a little bit. But before we do that, I want to kind of get into a little bit about my process and, again, why this piece is kind of emblematic. So to begin with, no one person is any one thing, especially when we are talking about art, music, or things that are abstract. We all take different meanings based on our personalities, our childhood, where we come from, so on and so forth. Which brings me to what I call the 3 Ds. Dualism, duality, and dichotomy. And this is what a piece of music like Elegy is on the bass. It is a lyrical, light, effervescent, but dark and lyrical and lush piece of music that's played on the biggest behemoth, elephant, rhino instrument that there is. So this is a dichotomy. This is something that really inspires a lot of my work. Finding the strength of sensitivity, finding the ugliness of beauty, because we cannot have any one thing without its reflection or its negative. So this is a concept that I have in a lot of my music. I'm going to play some examples about it, and I'm open to any questions about the piece itself, the process, my own personal life, although this isn't really a narrative-driven assignment, but any questions are open. So I'm going to start off with a piece, one of my earliest pieces that I wrote in 2007, and I wrote this on a flight coming back from Poland, and I'll talk a little bit about the duality or the dichotomy of the piece as soon as I pull it up. So it's centered around a particular bass pattern, and typically when we listen to most Western music, it's in a 4/4 or a 3/4 meter. And for those who don't know, 4/4 is a basic kind of like rock beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. A waltz would be in 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this piece is written in 2 different meters, but the pulse is always the same. So there's something that connects these 2 things that are diametrically opposed to each other. And it moves between 9/8 and 9/4. And these are technical music theory things that are important to understanding the music when we listen to it. So I'm going to explain I'll play an example of both so that we can do a little bit of music class for everyone. Okay? So this is the first bass line. It's in what we call 9/8 meter. The eighth note gives it the pulse. And this pattern, 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. It's felt in this very quick pace. And the second half, with the same pulse, so it's 4 and 5, 4 and 5. So this was, as we'll listen to in the piece, something that you can pay attention to as we go through the different sections. That's okay. It's going to fade in, so just give it a second. Then the solos happen. So this is one of my earliest pieces, and I didn't think about this concept when I wrote it, but looking back as a retrospective, I start to see certain themes or ideas, or really my therapist, aka my wife, helps me to like realize the things about myself that I didn't know were there, right? So yeah, so that's the first example of one of my earliest compositions. Let's fast forward to 2018. So this is a piece that was a collaboration with an amazing Cuban singer that I met when I was touring in Havana, and she is a santera. So when I was there, I got a ceremony done, and I got my orisha, and it was like super cool. So we kept in touch, and I had an idea for a song, and I really wanted her to sing on it. And when I presented it to her, she had this traditional chant to the orisha El Egua. And El Egua is, he controls the passages, the present and the future, or the journey. He's the saint who protects the journeys. So that could be between the heavens and the earth, or between any two disparate things. So this is a much different sounding piece, and so that also speaks to, I guess, some of the dichotomies and different things that inspire me. So this is called El Egua. has any questions or comments as we're going through, feel free to interject. I'm going to play another example. This is a very recent song, and this is actually off my album, which just came out today. So I highly encourage everyone to go get that. Thank you. Like, follow, share, rinse, and repeat. So thank you. And this piece is another. It's again a very different sound, but the same kind of basic elements are there. There's, in this case, two completely independent themes that are played on top of each other, and it creates a texture that allows for the musicians to play between. So there's almost always one or both of the melodies being played at some point of time, but there's a lot of collective improvisation and playing. And this song was specifically written in the wake of George Floyd's murder, but also for the years and years that we have been dealing with police brutality in particular. And this piece is called Every Damn Day, the Burn It Down Blues. It speaks to the cyclic nature of the last lifetime. So those are the pieces that I presented as compositions as part of my talk. So before we get to some more of the bass and bass playing, I want to just open up the floor for any comments or questions about any of the pieces or my process or anything at all. And if not, we can just play some more music. That's fine too.
Why you played the first piece and why you played the
Yes, so the first piece started out as something for myself in the pandemic, and this is going to relate to much more about my works in progress, which is as the first one is, because all of my music here is very collaborative, is very collective, and it's about the sum of the parts. So as much effort and energy goes into the personnel as it does the composition, and it often inspires one or the other. So without the ability to work with other people, I had to, there's not a ton of solo bass material. So this was kind of just the spark of learning the first piece, right? Just the out of necessity in a sense. But finding this, so originally when Bethany wrote this piece in 50 something, whatever it was, 1860 something. He was playing a much smaller bass. It was basically a larger cello. And this was the style of, before the orchestras got very, very big, the instruments were smaller. Trombones were smaller, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger as we go through the Romantic period, and the orchestras get big. Like you can think of Beethoven's Ninth as an example, right? The Ode to Joy. It's got a full choir and a humongous orchestra. So the instruments get bigger to bring more sound. So there's not a lot of material that before that was played as a lyrical instrument on this instrument, this modern bass, which is a very young instrument. It's the youngest of the viol family, which is the violin, viola, whatever. So this is a new kind of untapped style that's happening right now. There's a lot of bass players who are taking this instrument, the modern bass, and playing very lyrically and virtuosically like a cellist or a violinist. And I really wanted to work on my bass playing in the pandemic, besides just compositions and watching Netflix. So yeah, so this was a piece I thought was going to take me maybe 6 weeks or 2 months to work through, and I'm still a year and a half working through it because it has taught me so many things. And the second piece I'm going to play let's just get to it, I guess, so I can demonstrate a couple of things that these pieces are helping me with to make me a better bass player and a better musician in general, but how we use the bow. If I was using it in a typical context in the jazz band, if I was going to play, that's all well and good, but what it doesn't do is give the full expression, lyricism that one could achieve on a different type of instrument, right? So this piece, that's a lot of different kind of technique, right? Because that's dealing much more with dynamics, vibrato, accent, expression. In jazz, it's moving too fast to worry about that, and we're improvising. So you're really reckoning with so many obstacles. It makes it challenging because of where my level is with playing this type of way, because it's not something that I have ever really done. So that has a lot to do with that piece. Now, why it relates to the duality is just simply because of the fact that this is not an instrument that has ever been used this way. In the orchestra, this is how this instrument is used. That's what it is, right? Or if you're lucky, you'll get. That's what the orchestral world gives you, or a scale or something. So the solo bass is something that is not common. It's challenging. It presents a lot of obstacles. So for me, it's been really exciting and interesting to learn all these new things that I can apply to my music in other ways. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress. Any other questions about some of the other music that was played before? Or?
The third piece.
So the last one, right? Okay.
You have to get it recorded, and that makes sense. So, you have to get it recorded, but everyone's kind of like really doing some of their own thing. At some point, you have to decide. I mean, it seems like at some point you're like, yeah, this is the one. Like but how are you making that decision?
Well, I'd put my confidence in the other people that I work with. So I value their opinion. So you can tell when someone's into something, right? You can tell when someone's not into something. So if you trust someone's taste or their opinion, if you go out to dinner with someone and you're like, oh, this guy knows great restaurants, he's eating the food, he's like, I'm not feeling this, right? He probably knows what he's talking about. You might trust his opinion, right? So it's the same with me and music, So I work with people who we either have this similar backgrounds and expression, like we know the same, we come from the same kind of place, or I'm looking for them because specifically they're coming from a different place. So if they think that it's happening, then I just go with that. So it's not, because once you involve other people, it's a conversation, and you don't have, you can't control a conversation collaboratively. It becomes your a lecture, right? And that's not what this music is about. So when other people speak and it feels, sometimes you just get the energy, or, sometimes you throw it away. Sometimes you just throw it away, Yeah.
So I'm curious about that same last piece, which I think you called the Burnt Down Blues.
Every damn day, burn it down blues, yes.
Every damn day, burn it down blues. Okay. So do you have a story that you've sort of written? I mean, of course, we all, in some ways, are faced with that story every day in the news these days, but did you pick an arc of a story that you wanted to tell, or how do you approach composing something
So
like that?
that piece is really structured in a very specific way. 2 melodies, anyone can play either melody at any time. And then there's moments between, and it's totally improvised. And the purpose, and it goes with the title, Every Damn Day. And for me, dealing with the last 5 years or so, you wake up and it's like, every damn day. It's another black person killed. It's the climate change. It's whatever. It was every damn day. You woke up in the doom scroll on Twitter or whatever, and so it was really more about the unknowing of what each section is, because it could be tender and sweet and pretty, it could be explosive and visceral, it could be anything. And that's, again, like we were talking about just a second ago, but determined by the players and by what's happening in that moment, going with other people, that type of interaction. So there's a construct, but there's not a specific storyline. The narrative is always going to be different every time it's played. And that's also part of why it's interesting for me. So as also a complete, opposite to this other type of music that I'm working on now as well.
So I'm just curious, how normally one thinks of a beginning, middle, of an end, even with an improvisational jazz piece. So how do you accomplish that, or do you just say it can be successful without that?
Okay, so thank you for mentioning that. That brings me to my book of spells. So, freedom and truth through breaking down structures and genres. This is something that I believe in wholeheartedly. Everyone who we think of as a genius of any facet of life had to break the rules that came before them. They have to take what was there and see the world through a different kind of lens, and that's why we end up with, Albert Einstein, Mozart, whoever, right? The greats of all time. So structures are very important, right? But taking something that exists and flipping it upside down still gives people something relatable they can hold on to while presenting it in a new context. So the idea of, in a classic jazz setting, so if anyone here is a jazz fan or familiar, usually what happens is they'll play the melody together as a band, and then it's a solo for the trumpet, it's a solo for the piano, it's a solo for the guitar, and then we play the melody out. So it's very structured, and it usually follows a 32-bar AABA kind of format, and that's fine and well, but that's happened for 100 years. So what can we do with the same idea, the jazz quintet, with the concept of what the blues is, because that's not a defined category. We think about the 12-bar blues, the sound of, maybe B.B. King or something like that's the blues, but the blues is really just a narrative folk art it's a purely expressive form of music that in its origins was just usually one chord or no instruments at all, and just percussion, hand percussion, singing, clapping, because these were people who literally had nothing, right? This comes out of the slavery in the Deep South. So these are things that connect us because we have expectations that are developed through years of listening to things. So we have certain types of ways that musicians or composers take us on these journeys. But when you flip the script on people, it can offer surprise in a good or bad way. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to just take something that we're familiar with and using it in a way that no one has. And there are pieces that I do that are very straightforward and very straight ahead. It runs the gamut. So if you're interested to see the range of from very esoteric and avant-garde to extremely homey and down the middle, then there's a lot for you. But that also speaks to, kind of my narrative as a composer and performer.
Will you bear with me and let me ask one other question?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So I'm curious.
We have all night.
I promise I won't keep us all night. But I'm curious as you flip the narrative there, right? You break the structure that we're all used to. Do you think at all about how far you can push that and still keep your audience with you? In other words, do you kind of see how it's coming together and watch how people are interacting or how people are receiving that and think about, well, is there a place in which I need some boundaries because it's not quite
I don't inherently think about it, but if I was giving a separate lecture or talk, I would talk about my use of rhythm. And because I think rhythm is the most visceral and foundational element of music, we have rhythm, melody, and harmony. And rhythm, to me, relates to the body, the physiology, your heartbeat, your breath. There's rhythm, rhythm rules our life in many ways that we are cognizant of and not. So in music, rhythm is something that we can usually hold on to if there's a steady beat in a piece of music. So I like to present things that are pretty dissonant, adventurous, exotic, but I try to use tools through rhythm that are more connected and rooted. So the song we heard, the second song with the Cuban singer, I actually superimposed different meters, but you never feel it. You're not aware as the listener, but it was actually written in 5/4, which is another of these odd meters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like if you know the song Take 5, the classic like Dave Brubeck quintet. Booba dooba dooba da 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1. Or Mission Impossible theme song is another famous like 5/4, right? So that song was in 5/4, but I broke it up. So typically it's 3 beats and 2 beats and 3 beats and 2 beats, but I split it into 2.5. So it feels like it's still moving in even parts, even though it's really not. So that's like a technique that I really enjoy using. Same with the first piece, that's in 9/8, but you have this rolling feeling. It never feels awkward, like you're falling all over the place, even though if you were to analyze the music in a deeper way, you'd see, oh, this is not wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. But, it feels right. Yeah. So
Thanks,
it's right,
Michael.
I guess. Anyone else? Cool. So I'm going to do some more playing. My work in progress is a very long progress, and solo bass is something that I'm newly discovering. And there's a few particular bass players out of my jazz background that I'm going to highlight through some pieces. The first one is a guy named Oscar Pettiford. Oscar Pettiford was part of the bebop era, and he is an incredibly notable bassist composer, which there really weren't many of. Probably you guys all know the name Charles Mingus. Arguably the most famous composer, band leader that is a bassist. And I'm going to play an Oscar Pettiford song called Bohemia After Dark. Thank you. So that was Bohemia After Dark by the great Oscar Pettiford. So I'm going to play a new piece that I've been working on. I started it while I've been here, so it's a brand new little baby piece. And it's built around a very simple theme. And I wanted to try and do something that was purely diatonic on the instrument. So this whole piece is built around the natural tuning of this instrument, which is E, A, D, and G. And E, A, D, and G fit into many, many, many different tonalities. You know, it could be A minor, it could be C major, D minor, it could be a lot of, it fits into a lot of different scales and chords. So I took a very simple idea and I wanted to try and develop it through a very lyrical and tonal kind of way. So a little different than, more like a little baby little piece, not necessarily a jazz song, right? So we'll try it out. Untitled. So this evolution of solo bass or of lyrical bass or however you want to call it was really enhanced via the work of one bass player in particular, well two. There's the great Francois Rabath, who predates the second gentleman, but Francois Rabath is someone worth investigating. I'm going to talk more about a more contemporary artist named Edgar Meyer. And Edgar Meyer became very famous for his performance of the Bach cello suites on the double bass. And the methodology that he created in playing these pieces totally changed how bass players can use the instrument to play virtuosic and play these types of pieces that before were not able to have really been played. So I'm going to give it a go with a work in progress. This is the cello suite number 1, the Prelude. You guys have probably heard it before. So here we go. So there's 4 hand positions that are utilized in the whole performance of this piece. And that's it. But when you can play them across the entire instrument, it opens up a lot of different shapes and sounds. And I'll give you an example. So there's a passage that's built around a harmonic of A. A harmonic is a note that's produced when you don't press the string down all the way. So if I press it all the way down, I get a nice sound. If I don't press it all the way down, I get this light, airy, floating sound. And depending on which one you play, you get different pitches. So if I want to play an A, I have this A, I have this A, and this A. These two are the same, right? They're the same octave. So this passage in the piece centers on this harmonic. But then there's a problem, because then the intervals get too big, because you have to go like this. It's impossible, right? It's impossible. So we slide the thumb down here, and now we're going to use this G and this A. So something that I would never have ever thought of or figured out or anything without having gone through a piece like this. And now to discover that you have a nice A harmonic here. I don't know how or when that's going to come in handy, but I got it. I'm ready for it. So you can do these kind of really fast runs that would be impossible to do. So just looking at this piece of music and trying to figure it out on my own presented a lot of these types of problems that I needed help in understanding. So it's been really fun working out these kind of things. How are we doing with time? Anyone have the time? Good. I think I'm going to play a couple more. Is that okay? So another great jazz bass player is a guy named Dave Holland, very famous for his work with Miles Davis, Chick Corea. He's very legendary. So he has a very important solo bass record that he put out in the 70s, and there aren't very many solo bass recordings. So his is one that's kind of a pinnacle, and this is a blues that he wrote for solo bass. Thank you. So I'm going to open up the floor if there's any questions, comments about anything that you've heard or anything about the instrument or me or the music from before. It's wide open. And if not, it's closed. Those are the two options. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.